So I'm going to add some patina to this drop cloth fabric. It was just a little too plain. So we're going to use some instant coffee. I just wet my fabric a little bit with some misty water. Added some of the instant coffee, kept adding it until I liked it, and then when I got the spots that I wanted, I just took a wet damp rag and then wiped it to kind of blend it all in. Yep, that was instant coffee you saw, y'all. So in today's video, I am taking a couple old windows and making them into beautiful home decor. And yes, we are using some instant coffee on this one. So Chris just recently came home with these two beauties, and I was in need of some more wall decor for our retail booth. And oh, when you can find these old windows, full glass, oh my gosh, my mind just starts spinning as soon as I see them. Of course, I always wish that they were just, okay, I clean it off, I put my decorations on it, and I call it good. But no, they always need to be prepped. They were old windows, they were used. So a lot of times they had multiple colors of paint or multiple layers of paint. And I always do my little lead test strip. I get lots of questions about that. I just not repetitive about showing you all that, but no, there's no lead on this one. So all I'm doing is trying to sand off all the chippy paint that's going to be falling off. There's always that bump because you paint the window in why it's still in the house. So you have this humongous bump here that I'm trying to get smooth. And of course you can see at that bottom area all those drips of paint that need to be smoothed down too. And I am actually surprised how big of paint chips are coming off. So these two paints either didn't play well with each other, or it was just they never prepped the underneath paint first to put the next layer of paint on. So as you saw, it just came off in big chunks. And then I'm going to go ahead and go along the glass and get any paint that's been left on the glass itself. A lot of times you got some dirt buildup. A lot of these windows are just sat on the ground in a barn, in a shed. So they get lots of dirt buildup in that area. So why have the vacuum out? I might as well just take my scraping tool and get that all scraped off. Now, after getting my window cleaned with some Dawn dish soap and some hot water, sorry y'all, I forgot to hit record on my camera. And then I actually taped off the window itself, so I got minimal that I need to scrape off after I remove the tape. So I'm just using Kills paint and primer just to freshen this window up. I wish it would just be like a pretty chippy paint, but as you see, it's really not. And then dirt is not necessarily a great patina on this white window. So I love to do a couple coats of this Kills white to freshen these up. And then now I'm going back in and taking some 220 sandpaper on my Orbital sander. I'm going to go in and distress this piece, bring out some of that underlying wood on these sharp edges where there's some, I didn't like make the paint all completely smooth because I want some of that patina to come through, want some of that old paint to come through where it's a little bit on the yellow side, and then some of that natural aged wood from underneath. That'll just bring it back. It'll just be still be an old window, but it'll just be cleaned up more. And on the back side, all I do is the same thing. I just make sure that there's no chippy paint or anything like that that you have to worry about. But I'm not going to worry about painting the back side because I'm going to end up covering up this piece. Now I'm going to go ahead and flip my window over. I'm on the back side now, and I'm using Norix cloths to get it all nice and cleaned up because I'm going to be covering this back side up. So this is going to be one of its last cleanings. So just the Enviro cloth with just some water, and then I'll go ahead and use the glass cloth. If you are not a Norix fan, I always link them in the Amazon store. They are amazing glass cleaners. So now what I'm going to be covering up the back side of our window with. I usually do drop cloth fabric, but I just happened to go to an auction where they had this privacy curtain for $1, y'all, $1, and I got a whole bunch of money bags, and somebody wanted those off eBay. Thank you for your purchase. And anyway, so I did keep this one for myself because I knew that I would be able to use this to cover up the back of these windows. But I'm not a fan of that bright cream color that it is, so I'm just going to go ahead and give it that coffee dye to give it a little bit of age. Then I throw it in the dryer and then let it completely dry. I like all the character that it adds to the back of these windows. It's just, this fabric itself reminds me of drop cloth fabric. I need to do a little trimming on this piece. I'm going to cut those cords off, the tie cords, along with the edging, and then make it so that it is a more workable piece. And I know there are those of you looking at that going, are you going to iron that? But the way that you pull this as you're working with it to make it nice and tight on the back of this window, there's no need to waste your time and energy ironing it, because as you're pulling it nice and tight, it will pull out those wrinkles. Now that I have it all attached, I'm going to go back and do a little bit of trimming to get that excess fabric to not be hanging over the side of the window frame. So now I'm going to flip this over and get that glass on the front side of this window all cleaned up. Now I'm going to be Cricuting out some vinyl lettering for the front of my window, and I love to search Pinterest for ideas of old-timey signs to put on the items that I make. So I love the bed and breakfast. I love adding that farmhouse. I found a general font that's not too awful modern. But then when I got to the breakfast, my idea picture had a swooping effect going on the breakfast. So what I did, it's not a curve feature, and I'm not using the curve feature on the Cricut. What I did was each individual letter is a little bit shorter and then works its way back up. So like the B is like 6 inches, and then the R is like 5 3/4, and then the E is like 5 1/2, and then you just get to your even point and then you work back up. That's how I made those letters curved. And then I wanted a little bit more visual interest, so when I got to my word "and," I did that in a little bit more modern font and in cursive. But when it comes to your cursive fonts, when you type them out, they're not together, they're separated. So when you type them out, you need to go ahead and attach them together, but then you have to remember to weld them. So if you don't weld them and you go to cut them, then they will cut out as individual letters. That's one of those steps that you're like, oh, did I remember to weld it or not? And if you noticed, I typed out all of my lettering, not individual, all together. Then I'm going to size it appropriate, like the length of the window, the width of the window, and after I get it all sized, what I know is going to fit, then I need to go ahead and attach it all together. That way the Cricut knows that I'm doing one project, and then when I go to cut it out, it's going to end up cutting it out on 2 different mats. So it'll cut out my first grouping, and then I'll have to put in a new mat with some new vinyl, and then it'll go ahead and cut my second grouping out. So after I got it all Cricuted out, I weeded, reverse weeding, where you leave the letters on, which is kind of sometimes tricky, but we achieve it. And then I like to cut out each individual word. That way I know that, my spacing. And then I take a little extra step. I brought my lettering in 2 inches because I knew that I have 2-inch masking tape. That way I can keep it centered. And I really love this grid patterned transfer tape. And then I usually, it always looks kind of dirty because I reuse the pieces until it just does not stick anymore. And then when I have a new piece, I like put it on the work table so it picks up some sanding dust. That way that when I go to release it, it's not so terribly sticky. But yes, so now whew, it's the measuring off of where my first wording needs to go. That's another reason I like this transfer tape, is because it has that grid pattern on it, so I can center my lettering right in the middle of the grid pattern. I can go side to side. I know that my F and my E are going to touch each side of that tape. And this is a little bit smaller of a letter. Sometimes you can use that the material that you took it off of underneath, but I knew that I could control this okay with this short of lettering. I'll just use my scraping tool, make sure that all the little pieces and parts of the lettering are attached, and then I'll just gingerly doing a wiggling kind of motion kind of helps get that transfer tape off. And then I just, like I said, the vinyl, the Oracal 651 vinyl is what I always use, and it sticks very well to that cleaned glass. And yeah, I might have gotten a little bit on top of my lettering, but you know, I'm good with that. But I love how this turns out. So now we're going to go to the bottom, and I did the same thing when I was doing my measurements. I knew that I was going to go side to side, that 2 inches in, and then 2 inches from the bottom. Now I just have to fill in my bed, and the same thing, I measured from where the lettering is, not necessarily where that white paper is, from where my lettering is, and I'm going to go ahead and put another piece of tape. And if the level of difficulty wasn't quite enough for me on doing a window, yeah, my transfer tape was no longer as sticky to hold my E in place, and I really didn't want to have to go Cricut another one out. So I decided just to go ahead and cut the 3 letters apart and say a heavy prayer to the man above that I can get these all lined up. I never said I was perfect, y'all. I just want to let you all know that yet again. So what I'm trying to do now is stick my E back down to that white paper, getting this transfer tape off of it so I can use a stickier piece. It's like a fine line, you know, you don't want your transfer tape not to come off, but then you also want it to release from the vinyl. But I guess my sheet had just, it was time for me to change into another sheet. As I'm finishing up, centering my and in the middle, there's just a green tint to this glass. I don't know if you all can see that on camera, but that canvasy drop cloth fabric, I'm not seeing. I'm just seeing this green tint to the window. And I have an old window in my decor in my house that doesn't have anything on the back of it. And yes, it is green. So yep, you guessed it. I unstapled 3 sides of the fabric that I put on the window, and I'm going to go in with some of that instant coffee that I dyed this with and give it some splotches, give it some distressing, I've been aged, and we will see how this goes. So I'm just going very gingerly. I spritz the fabric first, and then that way the coffee would adhere to it, and then I can kind of control, I can keep adding, and then I just went around the whole fabric kind of here and there, deciding where I wanted these splotches to be. Sometimes the project, you just never know, but sometimes it is worth it, because I always say, please do something until you love it. And then I went one more step because I didn't want it to just look like it was blotches that I just attached that coffee to. And the instant coffee just dissolves right into the fabric. I just took my wet cleaning cloth, actually, from my Dawn dish soap bucket, and I'm just wiping down. That way it's going to kind of blend this all together. I don't want to take away the splotches by any means. Once I flip this back over, I hope I love it as much as I think I'm going to. So can I just share with you my cat Squirt, who thought I have been spending way too much time in the workshop, and he wanted to help me make the next window. They are so helpful, aren't they? And I'm actually surprised that the Cricut doesn't have a bed and breakfast font. They had a dead and breakfast like for Halloween, but they didn't have a bed and breakfast. So I can't really, you kind of have to create your own. But I did go in and I was looking for a fancier B for my next window. I wanted more swirls than what the fonts had. So for my next window, it's going to be a bed and breakfast, but I want the bed and breakfast to fill out almost the whole entire window, but I needed to make my bees match, and now I need to find a font that matches the bee that I found in the image search. So now I'm just going to go into my cursive. It lets you narrow it down by cursive and then figure out which font matches. But just like on the earlier one, on the cursive ones, as you see, they come separately, and Squirt, I'm sure he's going for the mouse, right? He's really going for the mouse. Nothing like your hand being they're bumping ground and moving your cursor all around while you're trying to attach your letters together. Because yes, I need to attach all my letters. I need to keep them in line and kind of match up where the swirls. Sometimes when you do this, you might have to tilt it a little bit. So then I'm just bringing them all in closer, and then remembering after I get them all lined up, I'm kind of using that bottom square part as my line. Not only do you want to attach them, but you want to keep them level too, and then remembering yet again to weld them together. And the S is one of them that I needed to kind of tilt so that swoop of the A and the S matched. Now my next thing I wanted to do is I made sure that my B's were the same size. And now I want my E and D of my bed to be the same size. So all I'm going to do is overlap it on top of my other E of my breakfast and just increase my size till everything lines up. And then I went with that same simple font that I used earlier on the farmhouse bed and breakfast for You Make Both, which is always a great seller when you do a bed and breakfast sign. And then I just picked out a little A to connect the two. So measuring off, making sure. The biggest thing when it comes to the window and the time consuming is probably measuring off, but really it does not take a ton of time. I just like to make sure the prep to me is the most important. That way it makes when I get my vinyl off the backing and onto my transfer tape, it makes the job of getting it onto the window just a wee bit, a lot easier. Now we just have a couple more steps to finish these windows up. So now I flipped it back over. This is the back side. This is why I said you didn't need to waste the paint to paint it. That fabric's covering up a lot of it. But then I also like to take this contractor's paper, what we cover our workshop tables with, to back these. So I just cut it size appropriate, hot glue it on, take some sandpaper on the edges to give it that nice clean line. So now I want to add a hanging system to the back, and I really like these eyelet hangers that I get from Amazon. I use a 6-inch ruler, that way that I can have them going down the same and they're level on both sides. And then I'll use a 17 gauged wire, which is nice and strong and weight appropriate for these heavy windows, and then go ahead and give it a nice twist, cutting it off and making sure that I give a tug to make sure that it is nice and secure. Because sometimes on these older windows, you want to make sure that there's not a weak spot in the wood. You want to give that wire a nice good tug. Oh my goodness, I loved that, we're going to call it a God wink moment, that that window was tinted kind of green and I wasn't seeing that tan of that fabric, that even though I coffee dyed the fabric, it just wasn't showing through. And then, you know, I'm like, hey, why don't I just take all the staples out and put little splotches in. I love it. I don't know, personal taste. It's like distressing. It's a personal taste, but I actually think it makes the wording, the vinyl wording, just bounce back. And I know not everybody has a Cricut, and you can buy transfers, and I know people on Etsy sell wording and you can order wording, but y'all, if you are a crafter, I highly suggest getting some kind of a cutting machine, because I am always surprised how many times I go to use it in my crafting. So let me know down below, have I inspired you to look at secondhand finds in a new way? Did you learn a new technique, or was this a technique that maybe I learned that was new to me? So thanks again for watching, guys, and as always, if you're part of our YouTube family, thank you so much. And if you are new and you're checking out this channel for the first time, I love to share my many makeovers with you all of secondhand finds, along with thrift hauls and furniture flips. So again, thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you next time, and you can see what we're up to. Bye!